The first 2 hits, I didn't really feel a thing.
Wait a damn minute. Wait a damn.
The skeptical side of my mind kind of turned on and was like, ooh girl, if you not feeling something now, you about to in a hot 10 seconds. That part of my brain was right. Experiences will vary. So I got to sit with some 5-MeO DMT, and it was an absolute honor. Let's talk about it. Quick DMT disclosure. DMT is classified as a Schedule I substance. DMT is one of the most potent psychedelics known to us. To even try to put this experience into words is to inherently do DMT a disservice, in my humble opinion. I am making this video for 1, educational and harm reduction purposes, and 2, as a piece of my personal integration and to share my experience / document my DMT journey. Experiences vary greatly. I do not suggest to anyone watching this right now to seek this experience out. I am not promoting or condoning any medicine or substance use. I am merely sharing my experience. But it was a big one! At that. So, I recently sat with 5-MeO DMT with a professional practitioner who, during our intake, urged me not to do too much further research past what I knew. So I didn't. Yes, I did know about DMT, but up until that point, I had done some light DMT research, some light documentary watching, because I was curious. I never thought that in my life I would be able to sit with this substance. So to sit with this substance was, again, an honor. And today we're gonna hop into my expectation of DMT, from TripTube to Gaspar Noé movies to, DMT, the God molecule type documentaries, versus the reality of the experience that I had.
Spirit molecule, it's a conundrum, it's a paradox.
Why is DMT in our bodies? Why is it in plants, in all sorts of mammals? What is the role it plays in humans?
Hey y'all, it's Chrysantilus. And today I'm doing my thing. This is my first DMT video. What an honor. I'm not gonna be able to stop saying that. What an honor to be able to share this experience with y'all. I couldn't be more excited to have y'all here. And if you're new here, welcome. We are a realm dedicated to psychedelics and sacred plant medicine, all about demystifying and destigmatizing the trip. If you dig today's video, please consider subscribing to this channel. We're working our way to our first 5,000 subs, and it would mean a lot. So I think the first time I ever heard about DMT was in the Gaspar Noé film, Enter the Void. It's a controversial film. I watched it when I was college aged. I actually believe I watched it the day that I was going to journey magic mushrooms for the first time, which was kind of funny because I didn't know there were gonna be psychedelics involved. I didn't know what the void was. It definitely opened this door of psychedelic visuals, kind of psychedelic culture. The film itself is from a very bro-y perspective, but in the beginning of the film, you see this simulated DMT trip. You hear people talking about DMT, and you see its kind of relationship to death and near-death experiences and experiences of death. It's a first-person POV for most of the film, which is really fascinating. But anyways, that film is controversial. Watch it at your own ability and read up on it first before you hop into it, because it's a lot. But yeah, then after knowing about DMT, I was like, okay, I wanna learn more about this. I will probably never do this in my entire life because it sounds like the most extreme experience, and I was really afraid of it. But I was really curious, and I heard more and more things about the benefits of sitting with this medicine. So maybe a year or 2 later, I watched the documentary DMT, the God molecule, and learned about DMT, learned a bit about ayahuasca, and then I wanted to learn a bunch about ayahuasca. I have not yet been able to sit with ayahuasca. I do hope to in the future, but if you don't know about DMT, DMT is a much shorter experience. The experience of being within the journey of DMT lasts for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Ayahuasca is hours, and it will last you an entire night. So DMT is not like that. And yeah, it was always the quickness of it, the intensity, the like blast off nature. I had always heard DMT referred to as like, you get like blasted up in the rocket ship or like blasted up in the roller coaster, or just like, it was like blast off, and it felt violent. It felt violent to hear. And I was like, I don't know if I want to have this kind of violent blast off, kind of out of the barrel of a gun into the psychedelic realm sort of a thing. So up until like 2 years ago, I was really on the fence in regards to if I ever wanted to sit with an experience of this magnitude. I was starting to meet people who were serving the medicine. I was starting to meet folks who were starting to do medicine residencies and starting to commit their entire lives to the medicine. And I was like, okay, the people that I'm meeting are reflecting a certain experience. And I was meeting folks around my age. That was another thing. Maybe I thought that maybe I was like too young for DMT or ayahuasca, but then I started meeting folks around my age and I was like, okay, if they did it and can do it, I feel like at my ripe age of mid-20 something, I can also do it. I made somewhat of a list that I would like to take y'all through today in terms of what I thought this was gonna be and what it actually was. And you know, it's a bit of a Venn diagram. There is a middle ground. There is like this middle space where it was exactly how it was described to me, but there is also a lot of outer space and circular areas. So let's get into this. Number 8, the dose. Oh yeah, so my first thing is just a note on dosage. I took DMT in a way that is relatively new to my understanding, which is to vape it, to take it via a vape pen. Before, folks would take it via a glass pipe and light it up, and if you hit it that way, you don't really have any kind of control. It's like 0 to 100 immediately, so I've heard. With the vape, you can control your pulls. I took 3 pulls, so I wanted to make that super clear for folks watching this who might have had a 5 or 6 pull experience, that this is coming from the perspective of I took 3 deep pulls from this vape, and I pulled until I didn't really understand what was going on anymore. And I could really feel the medicine coming on, and I could feel my limit for this first time at least. And I wanted to respect that limit. I wanted to like give reverence to it. I was pulling until I could not pull anymore, which is what I was told to do. Honestly, I was worried that I was only gonna be able to pull like once or twice, but the first 2 hits, I didn't really feel a thing.
Wait a damn minute. What a damn.
The skeptical side of my mind kind of turned on and was like, ooh girl, if you're not feeling something now, you about to in a hot 10 seconds. That part of my brain was right. So after my 3rd pull, I could feel myself like leaving reality. And I was being guided to pull further if I wanted to, but at that point I couldn't really. I felt like the rocket ship was lifting off a bit, and I couldn't really understand.
What's not clicking? What's not clicking?
I didn't have my typical grounded understanding of reality. The last thing I remember trying to say is like, can I lie back? And so I lied back and I totally took off. It was a really beautiful experience. This is why I have the disclaimer in this, because I don't want to glorify this experience. It's really intense. It's not so full of love and light for everybody, and I don't want to give y'all like DMT propaganda. But anyways, let's see. So the number 7 thing I have on this list is time. Something that I've heard from folks who have sat with DMT, and again, I'm speaking about 5-MeO DMT, was that they went into a place where time was stretched out forever, and they felt like they were gone for 6,000 years. Definitely something that I was like, okay, that might happen. That might happen.
A lot of people will be scared here. A lot of people will be scared.
I don't know if I would want to even live for 6,000 years though, so I had some feelings about that, but I didn't experience the 6,000 years, I didn't experience a time, so that's the first difference from what I heard folks talk about. I did not feel like I was gone for thousands and thousands of years. Maybe in the future when I take further pulls, like a 5th or a 6th pull, maybe that will come into play, but that is kind of like a hyperbolized version of what I experienced. Yeah, I was, for the most part, able to have a temporal understanding. I was able to, for the most part, understand time. But I feel like I was somewhat grounded in the time of what was surrounding me, like in real time. I just wasn't as connected to it, so it didn't really have as much of a bearing on my experience as it has with other psychedelic experiences. So yeah, I'd say I probably space traveled a bit more than I time traveled. Next up is like the blast off. So I have heard DMT described as like a G-force, like blast off into outer space. Like you're here 1 second and you're on the roller coaster like the next, and you're experiencing the turbo coaster and it's like all these G's. And that was just not my experience. Physically, that sounded like, as I mentioned, kind of violent and also sort of nauseating to me. But then again, the only people I've been able to find online talking about DMT for the most part are bros. And for the most part, they're coming from the same experience of privilege and like wanting the same like pow 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 out of the medicine and stuff like that. For me, it was more akin to the feeling of when you're lying down for a really long time and you get up really quickly and your body starts to pass out. Like you start to like black out a little bit and your body is basically like saving you from passing out. I'm not sure what the medical term for that is, but you know, you stand up a little quickly and that happens. It was somewhat more of akin to that because that is kind of like a stand up really quickly, you transition into a different state of consciousness really quickly sort of a thing, but instead of like standing up really quickly and transitioning into passing out, you're standing up really quickly and transitioning into this like hyper psychedelic state. And that feeling of like standing up really quickly and always passing out has always felt a little bit like death to me.
One up this time.
Whoa, like what's going on? It was really something to feel something similar to that on DMT. And it wasn't like I was like losing oxygen to my mind. Like I felt safe. I felt trust in the practitioner that I was working with and in the medicine, but it was a super unfamiliar feeling, more so than any psychedelic I've ever sat with before. It was a totally different journey, an entirely different world. I can much sooner say like, oh, LSD is kind of like mushrooms in this way or that way. Like DMT was really so completely different in a solar system of its own.
Please note, this trip report refers to synthetically sourced 5-MeO DMT, not NN-DMT. In future tapings, I will refer to this as 5-MeO to eliminate confusion. I'm still learning. Thanks.
Number 5. I had heard people talk about DMT as like, oh, it's so powerful, it's so emotional, and I can sit right here today and tell you that, yes, it absolutely was. Like, that's right on the mushrooms. That is completely my experience. One of the things I told my practitioner afterwards was like, I think that was the most powerful experience I've had.
So powerful. My mind, oh, it amazes me sometimes.
And so it was a lot of processing afterwards. I was almost just like, what do I do now with this? What do I do now with this experience? But it was emotional for me. I was crying really hard, harder and deeper in my soul and my heart than I have ever cried on any psychedelic. And that's saying something because your girl is a known fish and can be known to deliver the waterworks, especially when it comes to the mushrooms. But a lot of the times when I'm crying on mushrooms, it's just like, oh, the world is so beautiful and cinematic. Excuse me.
She's got a point.
For me, the meaning behind my crying on DMT was more so like,
I've never felt pure, unfiltered, unadulterated love before. And this is like love in its truest form, and it's the love I have for myself.
It felt like I was drowning in a good way. In love, like liquid love. and it was all around me, and I never experienced it that way. And I talk about this in my DMT experience video. That's like the before and after, and I'll probably also talk about this in my other DMT videos, but it was really emotional for me in my feeling just the purest love I've ever felt. I described it to my mom as like being handed my own newborn child for the first time, and that child was myself. And the love that I had for that child was really the love that I have for myself, which is where all of my love starts and emanates from. And I could see that in a very clear way. And describing this feeling to my mom, she was like, yeah, the only time I felt that before has been when I gave birth to you and your sister. So I had it corroborated, and it was a bit foreign. And I felt a bit sad that I had never experienced self-love to that degree. I could always hypothesize it, and I knew it, and I understood it, but I never felt it like that before. So clearly and viscerally and without barriers, like it was just a very raw love. That love was raw.
Incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique.
Okay, let's talk about my biggest fear with DMT, and that was losing connection with my body, somehow losing my ability to breathe, losing connection with my breath. And something my practitioner told me is like, connect to the power of your breath. So I was afraid that I would, from what I heard on DMT, when people just have out-of-body experiences and don't feel their bodies at all, and you have this ego dissolution where you just ethereal, universal goop and flow, and you turn into something. And you know, I didn't necessarily want to have the experience of losing track of my breath, because my breath is my anchor, my breath guides me through my psychedelic experiences. So I was afraid that that was gonna happen, or that like I wouldn't be able to breathe at the worst. And fortunately, I can say that that did not happen. I was able to understand myself through my experience. I was able to like deep breathe myself into it and through it, and I never lost connection with my breath. I noticed that my breaths were like rippling through time, like stuttered and rippling. Well, that's how it felt to me. I have no idea how it sounded, and I did not record it. It felt like I was going like, it felt like that was my breath. Like my breath was like, and then eventually like, kind of like if you're laughing and you can't catch your breath and you're like, I don't know how to say it. I can't even do it now, but it was effortless, and it just felt like my breath was going through like some seismic waviness, and that felt pretty nice, honestly. Something was like pushing my breath back from being able to just be like, I'll look and see if I can find another example of DMT breath on YouTube, and if I can find that, I will cue it here. But I did have some bodily sensations. I did not completely lose track of my body. I could feel my face like morphing, especially. And I described this to somebody and they're like, was that painful? And like, no, this wasn't painful. I felt like my body turned to putty and I was kind of being manipulated in certain ways. I felt my nose especially like curl up and open, and like my face stretch out. I felt pressure behind my eyes. I felt kind of like I was being warped into like maybe an elf like creature, and I could feel my face stretching and my body kind of stretching, but it was like mostly especially around my face. Yeah. Number 3, I had heard a lot of talks about machine elves and DMT doctors and like all of these beings, especially from TripTube and Arrowit and places like that. If you don't know what a machine elf is, it's a DMT entity that looks something like this. You know, it's giving Alex Gray, it's giving interdimensional, like, psychedelic being, and a lot of folks claim to have this exact same experience without ever being aware of each other's. Some folks have it before even ever hearing about DMT beings or elves. I would say that at the dosage I pulled, I did not experience elves, aliens, doctors, anything like that. My mind actually went directly to a spiritual leader that I really respect, who is Bell Hooks, and I have been reading her book all about love. Rest in power, Bell Hooks. She was absolutely the GOAT.
What do we teach our children about love? What is the miseducation we give them? And part of the miseducation we give them is that you can violate someone and then say you love them.
And I've been reading so much about love and learning so much about love through her and through her eyes and the eyes of other spiritual teachers who she quotes in her book. And I was just in awe and thinking about her so hard and really connecting with her, like, on a spirit level. Not to say, like, she was there objectively, but I was really just spiritually fangirling out and just thinking, like, wow, she was so right. Like, everything that she said about love in that book, like, I can feel it now and I can understand it through feeling it and not just understand it through thinking about it and hypothesizing about it. And I just thought about what a beautiful, incredible person Bell Hooks was and what an amazing spiritual leader she was. And that's who I connected with. I really connected with Bell Hooks. Again, not to say that her spirit was, like, literally there, but I connected with, like, my personal knowing of her and my connection to her that I have accumulated through reading her and, you know, watching her videos and that sort of a thing. The number 2 thing was, like, this has to go with, like, the DMT doctors, machine elf sort of thing, but, like, brain surgery. A lot of folks claim that they experience brain surgery when they sit with DMT. I did not experience anything that felt like a surgery. Again, I did feel changes in my face, like my nose flipping up and pressure behind my eyes, and maybe they were operating low-key, but to me it didn't hit me like, I feel like I'm getting operated on right now, or like something like that. It was just like, I'm being stretched and manipulated and pulled in these fun, wild new ways. And yeah, I felt my nose like literally like curling up and rolling back, and like I promise you it did not hurt. I know it sounds probably really scary, but it did not hurt. Lastly, folks talk a lot about ego death. Folks talk a lot about feeling like they did die. With DMT, I could, for the first time, tangibly feel like death on the other side in a way that I am unable to articulate. This is often referred to as the ineffable quality of psychedelics. I can't explain it except to say, if all of reality was a thick barrier pushing our heads away from looking at the inevitability of death and feeling death and being able to understand it and comprehend it in our mind, like the way our mind works is a machine that cannot comprehend death. Like if I told you to just imagine before you were born, imagine after you die, we can't do it. We can't do it. So I felt that barrier thin to a degree that it became almost translucent, and I could kind of feel my proximity to it and my proximity to death. I could understand that feeling translated through somebody else as I feel like I'm dying or going to die, but I could just understand that death was there on the other side of all of this. And I felt at peace with it. I've experienced a lot of death in my personal life and close circles over the past 5 years, unfortunately. And I know a lot of us have, especially with global events. So that was humbling to feel. And again, something I'd never felt before. And I feel like I have a slightly better understanding of death after having had this experience. It is a cliche to say this, but it is the great unknown. And I feel that sitting with DMT has allowed me to know it just, you know, a pinch more. Because I could feel it. Like I was like, oh, the veil was lifted, and I was looking, I was like, oh, okay. So that is my DMT expectations versus reality. Did you have any expectations of DMT, or do you have any expectations of DMT? Let me know in the comment section, and let me know if you have sat with DMT before, how those expectations differed from the reality of your trip. If you took something away from this video and enjoyed it, please subscribe to this channel. If you would like to rep the realm, you can check out our thread list, peep all these cute designs. I personally designed all of them. I really appreciate everybody who supports us by repping us, spreading the good word, etc. I'm about to launch a Patreon soon, so please look out for that. And also you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Chrysantilus. Yep, that's about it for today. Thank you again so much for joining, and don't forget to keep it trippy.